Hi, everybody. Shannon Petrovich with Therapist Talks. If you can see me and hear me, just give me a little thumbs up, and that'll help me know that everything's good. As you can see, my buddies are joining me today. This is Bailey. He's my rescue. Hi, buddy. You want to come say hi to everybody? Come on. He had a hard day yesterday. He was playing with a buddy all day, so he's tired. Come here and say hi. There. Hi. Hi. All right. Hi, everyone. Anyway, we'll be talking about dealing with and healing from narcissistic relationships today. And we are going to take questions and answer the best we can. So if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box or any topics. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be a topic that you'd like to hear about. And typically, like I said, we talk about narcissistic and other toxic relationships, but you can also jump in and ask anything you want. I've been a therapist for over 35 years, and we can talk about anything that you choose to do. If you're new here, welcome. Very glad to have you on board. As I said, the chat box is all yours, and ask any questions or topics. And first, I'm going to start with, so I always get and bring with me some topics and questions that have come in over the last 2 weeks from viewers on my YouTube channel. So I'm going to start to address those before we get anything else in. But like I said, anybody who has a question or topic, jump in, please. So if we're still triggered by people who have invalidate us and we block the person, does that mean that I love myself more and I'm not standing for emotional abuse? Or is it that my amygdala is still in fight or flight mode? So this could be either or both. Your amygdala is that little monkey mind inside of you that has only 3 options: fight, flight, or freeze. And so when that is getting fired off because you're stressed or anxious or terrified, I mean, it's supposed to only go off when we're terrified, but unfortunately, we in our lives live so on the edge all the time that our amygdalas can be going off all the time. The problem with this is that our rational centers go offline when our amygdala has taken up all of our energy. So we don't want to live parked and camped out in fight, flight, or freeze. That's not a way to live. And that's part of why living with a toxic relationship is so degrading and so tearing down and bankrupting. So over time, it will bankrupt you emotionally, mentally, physically. And when you live in that toxic environment constantly, you're constantly getting triggered. You're constantly getting triggered into fight, flight, or freeze. The problem too is that this becomes habituated so that you get stuck there and you can actually have trouble not being in fight, flight, or freeze, even when there's nothing stressful going on in your life. It's like you're constantly camped out in that place. The adrenaline is constantly surging through your brain, and you don't have the ability to calm yourself down. So people get anxious, depressed, and really struggle with these things long term. So it's extremely important that even getting away from the relationship is not enough. It's definitely important, and taking care of yourself past that is the next piece. So you have to learn how to do some self-calming strategies, self-care strategies. You have to be sleeping at night. You have to eat well and do prayer and meditation. All these things that calm down that amygdala so it's not constantly firing off. When it is firing off and it's because somebody has triggered you, it isn't like you're never going to get to a place where you're not triggered by somebody invalidating you. So if somebody is invalidating you, it should trigger you. In other words, we don't want to be numbed out to invalidation. We want to go, wow, that sucks. That person just said something that was really rude and obnoxious. And we do want to feel triggered, and we do want to say, time out, dude, I'm done. Or, like, I am not going to put up with that. So blocking them and reacting to that is absolutely valid. And you need to just know yourself well enough that you have those boundaries and you don't put up with that. So being triggered by that is normal. And it's healthy to block that person or confront that person if it's somebody who you have to stay in relationship with. And it also it can be true that your amygdala is still firing off. So the next question, again, if you have a question or topic, please jump in and throw it in the chat box. And I'm only going to keep doing these ones that have come in as long as you guys don't chime in on the chat box. The next one is a question about how narcissists make such a strong impression and oftentimes feel like our soulmate. So this is a really important topic, and it's really just critical to understand that somebody who has trained themselves up to be narcissists and manipulative and controlling, and that's kind of one of the indicators that you're really dealing with someone who's a narcissist is that their MO and everything that they do is in order to be controlling and manipulative. So when you recognize that, what you need to see is that they've practiced this throughout their lives. So they're really, really good at it. So don't feel stupid. Just notice, wow, they're really, really good at this. I have to take care of myself by backing out of this and not going back into it again. So recognizing that, validating that, not feeling stupid, but just kind of marveling and being a bit incredulous and like amazed is fine, and curious is fine. But recognizing that they can be really, really good at this, they can make you feel like you're their soulmate, they're your soulmate, and you cannot get away from them. And that's part of the shtick. It's part of how they control you. It's part of how they manipulate you and make you stay even when you know this isn't good for you. So recognizing that is really good, and saying and marveling at it is fine, but then not feeling stupid, just recognizing, wow, they got me. Um, the other piece of that is to know that this concept of soulmate, I'm not so sure about. I think there are a lot of people. Well, I mean, there are now 8 billion people in the world, so that's a lot of people. I think there are a lot of people in the world that you can connect with and on deep levels. And it's really important not to feel like that person is the only person who's ever going to love you. In my experience, when people get out of a bad relationship and they really take care of themselves, they go into the next relationship that's really amazing and really wonderful and really validating. So it's extremely important that you not put yourself in that box and feel like this is the only person who's ever going to love me. Because the truth of it is, that person didn't love you. So I hate to kind of break it to you, but that it would be better to be alone than to be with a person who is like that, right? And so, and I've felt this before too. I have in my, late teen years, right before college, been in an abusive relationship, thought that was the be all end all of that stuff. So I'm not talking just from all the textbook knowledge and all that stuff that I've gathered over the years. I've been there and I know that feels very intensely. And recognize that you take with you that ability to love and that knowledge about yourself, that you are a loving, giving, compassionate person who forgives and tries and is diligent and hardworking, and you're doing all that stuff to try to save the relationship. And you can take that with you into a healthy relationship. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Recognize that this person is not your soulmate and they didn't love you, because love is a verb. And so if you don't feel loved, they're not loving you. And that's kind of a weird, twisted thing. But you have to understand that when a narcissist says they love you, they mean one of two things. You're doing it right now. And and they're trying to praise you basically for doing it right. And you're behaving the way they want you to behave, which is to not deny yourself and put all the attention on them, or they're trying to manipulate you into doing something the way they want you to. So all of this is not love. You have to recognize it, you know, recognize it and grieve, because it's sad. If you poured a lot of your heart and soul into it, if you have had kids with this person, or this is your parent or your adult child, recognizing that they weren't loving you and don't love you is really painful. So you have to grieve. You have to take care of yourself. And you have to go through the process of self-care. And I talk about that a lot in my book. I know some of you have already gotten this. If you haven't, jump into my website, nofoggydays.com, and it has the link to it. But this tells you a lot about how to take care of yourself, how to unravel all the stuff that has been done to you, how and all the stuff that maybe was done way long time ago when you were a kid. So it's extremely important to do all that self-care, really take care of business, clean house, emotionally speaking, so that you can move on to into a good relationship. Do you think that keeping a diary of thoughts, including many angry ones, is helpful, or does too much writing cause excessive rumination? Great question. And the answer is both. So, in my book, I talk a lot about journaling. The subtitle is Journaling to Help You Heal from Toxic Relationships. Because when you journal, you're talking to yourself and you can dialogue with yourself. So, we start with dialoguing about what are the negative messages you give yourself inside your head every time you're struggling, anytime you're upset, anytime you feel stupid or anything. If you beat up on yourself continuously, and I used to do this when I was in my early 20s, so this is like when I recognized it, I went, "Oh my gosh, that I have a toxic relationship with myself." So it's super important to be able to write all that out and then figure out where it came from. And that's the first set of journal prompts that are in my book. So you have to start doing this sort of back and forth. Like, I like to vent in my writing and journaling. When I used to journal a lot, I would vent, 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 and then I would say, "Yeah, but." So it's kind of putting my venting self, my angry self, and then my healthy self would kind of come in and be solution oriented. So I think the angry ones, yes, I would encourage you to vent, 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 and write, write, write. If that's how you get stuff out, I think that's wonderful. And then it doesn't cause rumination as long as you come back in and are solution focused with yourself. So, yes, but, yes, but. So trying to take the focus off of them at that point and say, okay, what can I do to take care of myself today? What boundaries do I need to set? Do I need to get out of this relationship? The other thing that's wonderful about writing, and this is the other reason I encourage it, is because when you write out all the things that have happened in this relationship, you see it. And then your rational mind is on board. We talked about the amygdala, that's the fight, flight, freeze, the emotional, irrational mind. You've got to get up into your rational mind where you can lay out the facts and say, this is the stuff that's actually happened in this relationship that's unhealthy. And when you focus on those facts, you can say, I need to get out. I need to set these boundaries. I need to do A, B, and C. And so if your writing is not just rumination, not just venting, but then it goes to these are the facts, this is what I need to do, then it's productive. Does that make sense? So, my own daughter was married to an addict. If you want to say more about that, Kathy. But so I'm guessing that your daughter is married to a negative person that's really hard to deal with. That is really, really a difficult situation because you have to support your daughter, but not get in the middle of that difficult relationship. And this is where people sometimes get sideways with their kids. You need to kind of support her and help educate her, but not make her feel like you're taking over and controlling her life. And it's a difficult line to walk. But I think it is important because again, when we're talking about lining up the facts, part of the being lost in the fog of one of these types of relationships is that you can't figure out what's factual and what's gaslighting and what's real and what's all the manipulation. And so when you can line things out for somebody and when you can reflect something back for somebody like your daughter, then maybe that'll help her line up the facts and be able to figure things out on her own. Um, A narcissist sexually harassed my married friend, and when she called him out on the boundary violation, he raged at her. She ended up apologizing to him. They are so good at flipping the script. This is a really important piece, and I've seen this happen over and over again, where that projection. I did a video on projection, how narcissists tell on themselves. So the very thing that they accuse you of is always what they're doing. The classic is always that super jealous, super, you went to the gym and you were looking at guys or blah 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 blah, or looking at girls or whatever, like that super hyper jealous person is usually the most untrustworthy person, because they're projecting that jealousy on you because they're untrustworthy and they're unfaithful. And so it just screws you up so badly. And again, that's how we get lost in the fog, the fear, obligation, and guilt of a narcissistic relationship. So, yeah, it's so good for people to say, that's gaslighting, that's projection, that's a complete flipping the script. And that when you can help someone see that that is actually a thing, then they're not just lost trying to figure it out honestly, when people don't recognize it or don't have a community like this to go to, they typically just feel like they're going crazy and typically feel like they are a terrible relationship partner. They're never going to get it right. It's just an awful feeling. So, really want to encourage people to reach out and help each other. Haven't heard that about solution focused writing after venting. Very good. Venting makes me feel ashamed at times. It can, because you can get kind of lost in it. And when you're just venting, 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 whether it's to another person, and this you've got to be careful about too. So, say you're just venting to a therapist, and your therapist never gives you any solutions or positive feedback or anything to kind of shift your gears into a more positive solution focused approach. You will just kind of go down, down, down into the despair of that, into the ugliness of it. And you are just ruminating, honestly. And that's a perfect word. And the rumination comes honestly because when you're in this relationship, your focus has to be entirely on that person. You have to notice their every whim, their every need, their every want, their every mood, their every little shift of mood. Because if you don't, you get blasted, right? And so you have to be constantly ruminating about that person. And so when you get out of that relationship, that rumination doesn't usually stop. And that's again why you have to heal. And I would love it if everybody had a good therapist in the world, but we know that's not true. So venting and then being solution focused is your best friend. And you can usually do that with yourself. I mean, you know you better than anybody. But if you can't do it with yourself, if you're just going negative, 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 get with somebody else who can be positive and who can be honest with you too and direct. Because some people will just kind of be yes people, and that's not what you want. People who will only support that negativity are not helpful. You have to be able to shift gears into what can I do to save myself, to get myself in a better place, to feel better about my life, and to shift gears, whether it's getting out of this relationship or whether it's emotionally distancing so I can take care of myself, even if I have to stay in the relationship. So I've done a bunch of different videos on things like this. Being the journalist, sort of being able to emotionally step back and watch the circus go by, and there he goes doing this thing, and there she goes doing that thing, and just kind of emotionally separating from that and not letting yourself get drawn in again and again and again. Daughter estranged me, took away my grandchildren I have not seen in 5 years. Oh my gosh. This is really, really painful. Daughter abused her teenage daughter. I tried to help and she tried to get me for kidnapping. This is really, really difficult. And there are just no easy ways around this. There are a lot of people who are dealing with a narcissistic child who then keeps them from their grandchildren. All I can say is if you feel the need and the want to coexist with a person who has narcissistic traits, what you need to do is learn to take care of yourself, learn to emotionally separate, and learn to set boundaries. And those are the very most basic things. And learn to, basically emotionally step back, watch the manipulations, watch the games, watch the abuse, and not get engaged in it. Because if you don't get engaged in it, oftentimes you can really stay emotionally separate and you can stay involved with grandchildren and not get sucked into a relationship, a dysfunctional relationship with your daughter, son-in-law, son, whatever the case may be. It's not easy though, and I would really encourage you to try to have a therapist to bounce these things off of, because this is really tough. In your experience, do you find that narcissists ever mellow and improve with age, or do they just become even worse and nastier versions of themselves? This is interesting because I don't know what the percentages are, but I did a video couple of years ago called The Aging Narcissist and Those Who Care for Them. And about half the people said that they got worse with age, and about half said they mellowed out with age. So I've seen both ways, and I've definitely worked with people who probably were raging narcissists in their younger years, and then they were pretty mellow and willing to work on themselves later. I've also seen people. I used to work hospice, and I saw people go raging into the abyss, literally, just treating people horribly all the way to the end. So I think you can, if you have to be a caregiver for a narcissistic parent, you can do your best again to stay in your own skin and in your own recovery, taking it just as taking as much of an emotional backseat as you can, and only being present with them as long as they're not being abusive. If they're crossing the line over and over again, I think that you try the grown-up timeouts. And what I mean by that is, okay, mom or dad, I'm going to take off for today. Um, I'll come back tomorrow, but you need to not talk to me that way. I'm not going to let you be disrespectful and rude, and we can try again tomorrow, or hanging up the phone, same kind of thing. So you're kind of giving them a grown-up timeout. You're kind of telling them what you will and won't put up with. You're giving them another chance to see if they can change their behavior. And ultimately, if you keep doing that, then at least you're taking care of yourself, and you're taking that garbage in small doses so that you can sort of keep your shields up. I think of them as Star Trek shields, and the Klingons are throwing their weapons at you, and you can kind of take it for so much time, and then you really have to, warp speed out of there and go recharge your batteries, because you can't hold those shields up for very long before your energy core winds down. Sorry about if anybody hates Trekkie stuff, but I think it's a great analogy, because we can kind of hold up our shields and kind of be present with somebody for a certain amount of time. And same thing with your adult child. You can kind of show up and just be present and do the grandchildren thing, and not get engaged in the battle, and not sort of go tit for tat and sling arrows back and forth. But some people just are really awful as they age, and other people really see that, and they kind of back off and they go, wow, I've alienated everybody in my life, and my life is very lonely, and I'm getting towards the end, and this sucks. So I think I would, even if you've been estranged from a parent for a while, I would check it out, see what happens, set your boundaries, know that you're going to kind of walk in with your shields up and see what happens, and know that you have an exit strategy if things don't go well. Because, like I've said, I've seen it both ways, that it's gone well or it's not gone well. And I think it's worth a shot when you think about somebody kind of getting towards the end. Let's see. Um, so not seeing your grandchildren for a long time is really, really challenging. And I don't know. It's I'm glad you're starting therapy, good. And it is so hard when you've had a separation because the kids are the innocents in all this. They don't have any, they're the ones. And if obviously if there's abuse or neglect that you know is happening, I think it's really important to call Child Protective Services, whatever the equivalent is wherever you live. I know some people don't live in the U.S., so it may be called something different, but I do think that it's important to call something what it is. And people will say, well, but then they won't ever talk to me again. Well, they might not ever talk to you again anyway, but you do have a responsibility to protect the children. So if you feel like there's abuse or neglect, it's important to call that out, and let the system take that. I also know that it's not uncommon for um, I recently had an experience where a narcissistic sibling was was kind of creating havoc with a parent and the other sibling, and the other sibling was concerned about abuse and neglect that the narcissist was doing towards the parent. So calling adult protective services is also an option when you know that there's an elderly person who's vulnerable, um, who is getting abused and neglected by a narcissistic sibling or other family member. So it's important that, you know, that we engage in calling 911 or adult or child protective when we need to. We tend to get lost in that fog and not realize that we do have other resources. If my resources are not enough, there are others. So we can call others and we can get help. And it isn't, it's the narcissistic family system that tells you not to not to talk about it, not to feel anything about it, and not to ask for help. Well, that all needs to go out the window. We need to tell the truth in love. We need to set good boundaries. We need to take care of ourselves, and we need to ask for help when it's important to ask for help. Let's see. It's shocking the extent that flying monkeys go into denial about how awful a narc is. I showed hard evidence of a narc being a convicted sex offender, but the flying monkey said it must be a mistake. That's amazing, but doesn't wholly surprise me. And really sadly, I think that the the ability to manipulate is so profound that when a flying monkey is under that manipulative spell, it you can't pry them loose, and you're not going to get anywhere trying to pry them loose. They're in the fog too. They're in the fear, obligation, and guilt of that person. They're not coming free unless even you lined up the facts and they still don't see it. But it wasn't wrong to line up the facts because those facts will add up to other facts and add to other facts. And maybe eventually they'll see the truth. Maybe eventually their rational mind will kick in and they'll find out what they've been doing is really wrong, that they're lined up with the wrong person. And this sickness is really profound. So yeah, it is shocking, and I've heard some really amazing things, and it's incredibly sad, and especially if that person is a convicted sex offender, that they shouldn't be anywhere near them. You got an attorney, and they believed her. Yeah, so um, that's the unfortunate thing is when this person is good at this, they're good at it with everybody in the world, and so they're going to oftentimes turn other people against you, and you become the bad guy in every situation, and there's almost nothing you can do about that except try to evict yourself, just try to get out of their way. But yeah, you are sometimes, and I've been shocked at some of the things that have happened. I've seen people whose narcissistic partner took them to the cleaners and the judge completely sided with that person. I've seen them end up with control of the kids. I've seen lots of really messed up things, and it's because they're good at it. So They're, again, grieving. Sometimes it's just grief because you can't control the outcome of these really manipulative people. Ah, please come pick up my. I went no contact with somebody 5 years ago. I would have sent the police to come pick up my daughter, and we have much more power. And I was sure to leave her house once she'll be 18 next January. I'm not completely sure what you're saying. I think there are a few missing words. He has more power. I would have lost my daughter. Yeah. So there are times when, um, and here is where it really helps to have somebody that you can talk through these things with, because you may have to back away from a situation just to not lose somebody that's really precious, like a child or a grandchild. Um, Jump in with any more questions or topics, and I will also share some of these others. Talk about the shock when you realize you never mattered to them at all. So this is really tough. And I talked about that a little bit already, but this isn't love. And so when you realize that this isn't love, you've got to really back up entirely and say to yourself, okay, I attached myself because you may have loved them, but it was an attachment. Essentially, it's helpful not to call it love because it wasn't reciprocal love. So you attached yourself to someone very unhealthy. You've got to rebuild a better creepometer or narcometer, and when you do that, you're going to um, be better equipped not to attach yourself to somebody like that again. And so I did a few years ago how to develop a trustworthy creepometer, and it's a really important video. Also, my empathy is killing me. Another important video, so that you recognize the things that you have done that have let you get sucked into a relationship. Their behavior is never your fault, but getting attached to someone that is very unhealthy for you and staying there for a long period of time, again, isn't your fault that they are the way they are. But we have to take responsibility for what we can take responsibility for, which is our own attachments, our own boundaries, and our own willingness and ability to stay or leave. So those are the things we can choose. Everything else is up to them. So I can choose my attitude, my actions, and my awareness. And those are the 3 A's. And those are the things that we have to absolutely do for ourselves. I noticed that narcs refer to therapy in a pejorative way and always flippantly say, you need help, you need to get therapy, but they never seem to consider it for themselves, though they need it. Yes. So, one of the quintessential traits of narcissists is that nothing is their fault. Everyone else is to blame for everything that's going wrong in their lives. They are constantly blaming others. They're constantly telling you it's your fault, whatever's going on in the relationship. And if you would just do this, this, and this, and stop doing that, that, and that, everything would be fine. And unfortunately, if you are a people pleasing, placating, peacekeeping sort of person, which a lot of us are, and I put myself in that realm too, that you can get drawn into a relationship like that and get lost in it very easily. So it's extremely important that you stop people pleasing, placating, and peacekeeping. Start taking care of yourself, start telling the truth in love, and starting from the very get go. Your own wants, needs, your own emotions, your own thoughts, your own feelings, everything you need to put out on the table and be all the way present with in every relationship. Because when you're not, then you're all about them. Then you're basically feeding the beast. You're throwing kerosene on those flames. When you just pay attention to them and you're all about them and you don't care a whit about yourself, you're feeding that beast and you're getting sucked in and attached to somebody that is not an equal relationship person. So it's extremely important to recognize that. If somebody can't see anything that they've done wrong ever, like, in the beginning of a relationship, I like to encourage clients to um, ask what a person learned in their last relationship. And if they didn't learn anything, and if they were just putting down that other person, and sure, they can tell you that that other person was this, this, and this, and they were terrible, terrible, terrible. But you need to listen with your whole mind, your rational mind and your emotional mind, and listen with your whole self. And if they are just blaming everything on somebody else, you got to take a step back and take a look at that, because we all should learn something from each relationship. And if they didn't learn anything, then you want to take a huge step back and take a really big pause. You need to listen carefully in those early conversations with somebody. And if they have a really negative thing towards therapy, yeah. Anyway, went to therapy for the years, and every week cried, and the therapist said, "I don't think that's how she feels." Hi, Danielle. Um, uh, I'm a little confused, Cynthia, but I think that and therapy is a very, very personal thing. And if you don't jive with the therapist, you need to find somebody else. It's a relationship, and it's an extremely important relationship. If you don't feel heard in therapy, there's something deeply wrong. And you need to have that conversation with the therapist right off the bat. Now, of course, there's transference. Of course, we bring ourselves with us to therapy. And so if you're always not feeling heard, then maybe you need to have that conversation with the therapist so that they can say, well, I hear you, and I've said this and I've said that. And then you can sort out your issues with the therapist. But you absolutely have to say that to the therapist. And you should never, 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 never be in therapy with a narcissist, okay? Anyone who is abusive, you should not be in therapy with them. They should be in therapy, you should be in therapy, but never together. There's a saying in therapeutic realms that doing therapy with a narcissist is just teaching them to be better manipulators. And doing therapy with a narcissist in a couple setting is absolutely teaching that person to be more manipulative. It is oftentimes very abusive and traumatic for the victim, because the narcissist is having their way with the therapist, manipulating the therapist to help that person beat up on the victim. So if you're having a bad time in therapy with your narcissistic person, don't do it. You need to have therapy yourself. And if they want to change, they need to go to therapy too, not with you. Okay. Super important. And I think some therapists are too new to know this and are too green to recognize it. So you have to call it. If you feel like you're not getting well, if you feel beat up at the end of a therapy session, you need to have a sit down with the therapist by yourself and talk about what's going on. But you should never be in therapy with an abuser or a narcissist. You got double abused by many therapists. Yeah, no doubt. And I feel sad about that. Therapists should be more savvy, but we're humans too. And I think that it is sadly not uncommon for a narcissist to be able to manipulate a therapist. I've seen it over and over again, and a pastoral counselor too. I've heard of pastors who act as marriage counselors, and they are manipulated by the narcissist, and it's just a mess, an absolute mess, and it feels like abuse all over again. So if that's what it feels like, you need to bail and get your own therapy, individual to you, and don't do it with the other person. You will feel invalidated, and And yeah, I mean, if somebody is really good at this, like I said before, if they're good at it, they're good at it. And they're good at it in every realm. And they're good at it at work. They're good at it in their social settings. And they're also good at it when they show up at a therapist's office. Now, I can typically suss that out. And when I call it out or have people come separately, then it's really yeah, they usually bail. So, yeah, narcissists, just going back to an earlier question, they don't show up at therapy unless they're dragged there or unless they think they can manipulate the therapist. And they'll stick around as long as they are manipulating the therapist. And when they get called out on any of their stuff, they will bail. So, by the grace of God, our last therapist, whom my soon to be ex recommended, knew exactly what was going on. And that truly validated me. And now she's my therapist. That's awesome, MF. I'm really glad for you because that's really, we all need that validation because our amygdala in that fight, flight, and freeze mode is lost in the fog. The emotions are intense. We are lost in that emotional mind and we don't know how to make good decisions from that emotional mind. Our whole rational center is offline. We can't make good decisions from that emotional mind. We're attached, we're trauma bonded, we're confused, we're in the fog. It's impossible to make good decisions. So when you have a good therapist and you can bounce these things off of that person, or you do the work, like I've said through my book, and you bounce it off of other trusted individuals or with yourself in your journaling work, then you can actually start to get well and see some progress. And that's so important. But being validated is crucial. And being invalidated by a person in authority like a therapist, which we do have sort of a weird authority thing. I don't even know what to call it, but there is sort of this pseudo authority. We don't have any authority really, but there's this pseudo authority that is given to therapists. And so when you feel invalidated by that person, it's very powerful. And it's like being invalidated by a parent or a professor or a coach or somebody else in sort of that pseudo authority role. So it's really important not to let that happen. And if it happens, to recognize it could have been that that person was just being manipulated by the person who's been manipulating you. So it's really important to call it out and get help and get good help. A mistake going with him. He did learn the lingo and used it on me. Yeah, and narcissists are really good at therapy speak, and so they'll grab onto those little things and they'll say, and it just cracks me up because they'll say something to somebody and they're basically using therapy lingo back, and then they'll try and use it on me too, and that's always funny. Um, Husband never showed up at therapy, but somehow my therapist did not believe me. Yeah, you need to get somebody else. My book is on the way. The first one, Amazon lost. Oh man, I'm sorry about that. And your book is arriving. Thank you guys. He would twist the words the therapist would say after the therapy session. So obvious. That is another thing is attacking from that from therapy speak, and that just bugs me so much. So they'll take something that I've taught, and then they'll twist it around and then blast their spouse with that again. And so that's really important. Again, step back emotionally, watch the circus go by, and just see it as all manipulation, all control, all a bunch of garbage, and you don't need to jump in on it. When you see that stuff happening, step back, take care of yourself emotionally, and say, wow, there they go again. Yep, totally saw that coming. So super important to see those things. So we just have a few more minutes. I'll see if we can jump into one or two more questions. Somebody else talked about, I'm still ruminating after 25 years. So again, this is really, really important that we recognize in that relationship, you are trained to ruminate on that person. you're trained that every thought, feeling, mood, emotion, desire has to be attended to constantly. So you're constantly other focused. All of your attention is like a spotlight on this other person. So when you leave that relationship, or even if they leave you, that rumination on that other person is constant. It's still there in your head. And what happens is that oftentimes people will continue to ruminate and they will get drawn into obsessively watching videos on narcissism. So be careful about that. And that's why in all of my videos, I always at the end give you solutions. I'm always very solution focused. We're always recovery focused and healing focused and how to get well. We're not sitting and just dwelling in the negativity of that person. That's not where we want to camp. We don't want to live there anymore. Done. So, yes, you're going to ruminate on that person. You're going to feel lonely. You're going to feel lost. You're going to want that person back in the worst way. Your little amygdala is completely attached, completely trauma bonded to that person, and letting go is really, really hard. So you've got to recognize, okay, I recognize I'm feeling drawn back in. I feel attached. I feel trauma bonded. I feel like I want to text them, call them, go to see them. I want to get them back in my life because I can't stop ruminating on that. Don't do it. You have to step back. You have to take care of yourself. You have to recognize, what are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What do I want to do with my life? What are my dreams and aspirations? And begin to focus in on you. And people have such a hard time with that. And if you're still ruminating after any amount of time, you've haven't made the switch to focusing back on you. So please, 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 if you hear nothing else today, I want you to hear that, because people are constantly doing that. And even sometimes the questions that people ask me, it's obvious it's still really focused on that person, diagnosing that person, even, a lot of times people will say, well, I saw that person on social media and now they're married and now they had a baby and they didn't want to have a baby with me, or da 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 da. You're ruminating. Stop. Stop, stop, stop. Stop, stop, stop. You've got to block that person. You've got to get away from their social media, any kind of contact with them, and focus in on you, because otherwise you can't heal. If you never focus on what you want, what you need, what you like, what you desire, what your thoughts and feelings are, how can you ever heal your life? How can you ever change your life? You can't. You have to start in here. So that's why in my book, I talk about that first. How do you correct your relationship with yourself? And then how do you heal through this whole thing? My focus is on me now. Awesome. Let's see. I used your watch the circus phrase with a friend of mine who's going through a terrible divorce, and she laughed. And that humor is part of what's helpful, right? Because when you can watch the circus go by and when that phrase makes you laugh, it helps you to disconnect from that craziness and not take it on and not feel it's about you. It's just this crazy circus that goes by, whether you're in it or not. You don't have to get in it, and please don't get in it. It's terrible. Learn more on narcissism only so that I know how to protect the next move, yet to be divorced. Yeah. Um, Good stuff. All right. So we're starting to get towards the end. I want everybody to know that my website is kind of new and fresh, and please jump on there. Sign up for my newsletter and my blog post so you'll get a little blast when I put up something new. And ask other questions on there, or make comments or questions on any of my videos, and I'll bring them forward to the next live stream. Yeah, so I want to really encourage everybody to take really, really good care of yourself. Oh, you've signed up for my newsletter, yet to receive anything. Absolutely. I have been super busy lately. I apologize for that. But once I do get a handful more of things going on, I will definitely get some stuff out to you. Because I've been alienated from my youngest son, I find it hard to forget. You know what? When you are estranged from a child, I think that's one of the hardest things. A partner is hard, yes, but I think a child is absolutely much more difficult. And I really want my heart goes out to you. You can do some of the things I've suggested with your child, adult son or daughter, setting boundaries, doing timeouts, grown-up timeouts, I call them, and doing those kinds of things to see if you can reconnect, keeping yourself emotionally distant from the circus, from any of the antics. But sometimes it can be retrieved and resurrected, and sometimes it can't. And I am sorry for that. Then you just have to take care of yourself as you grieve that loss. Anyway, take good care of yourselves, everybody. And if you appreciated this, please like and comment and also share it on your social media. Make sure that you're subscribed, and I will see you again in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody. Take good care. Bye.